Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and you're listening to the Astrology Podcast. Today, I'm doing a live stream where I have a group of patrons who are joining me, and we're going to do a casual chat talking about two different topics probably today. One of them is just talking with people about transits in their chart recently and unique manifestations that have happened in their life over the past few months in terms of some of the astrology that's been going on recently, and especially the houses that planets have been transiting in their chart and how that's manifested in life events. And then secondarily, the other thing I'm looking for is people that have had a unique circumstance in their life and are curious what in their birth chart indicates that in terms of something that's really characteristic about the life or something that stands out that doesn't happen to everybody, and seeing if we can identify what natal placement or placements actually correlate with that event or that circumstance that had in the life. So those are two sort of topics, and it's gonna be kind of casual today. I don't have this very prepared, but I just wanted to do this because doing these live streams is a benefit sometimes that we do with patrons occasionally, just to talk to people that support the podcast and to give me a chance to do one of my favorite things, which is just to look at charts and to hear interesting stories and to talk with people about their chart and their transits and birth chart placements directly. All right, so why don't we queued up a few of them ahead of time, and the first person I was going to talk to was Teresa. So let me promote you to a panelist. Hey, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Chris. How's it going?
It's going really well. All right, so tell me, what was your story again?
I was a gestational carrier twice after having three of my own children.
Awesome. All right. I love that because like I said, I've been researching the fifth house example or episode still recently, which is going to be a big episode, but I realized there were more aspects of the fifth house that I hadn't thought of. And this is actually a really, really good one, which is, um, yeah, helping other people to have children basically is part of that, right?
Hmm.
All
Yep.
right. What's your birth data?
February 22nd, 1982, 8:03 p.m., Bend, Oregon.
All right. And is your ascendant 1 degree of Libra?
That's right.
Okay. Always got to check. So here's your birth chart. So you have Libra rising and you have the moon and Mercury in the fifth house, in the fifth whole sign house, in a night chart. So the moon is actually your sect light. It's the more important luminary because you were born at night. And let's see, what's the ruler of the fifth? The ruler of the fifth is Saturn. It's actually placed in Libra in the first house of like self and identity. So tell me about this. So you said you have had your own children?
Yeah, I have three of my own children. They're 15, 13, and 10. I would say I always had that, like, the thing I most wanted in life was to be a mother, pretty
Okay.
intensely.
So as you even growing up, like really early on, it was something that you knew you wanted to do?
Yeah, I was the oldest grandchild in a very large family, so I was always babysitting my younger cousins and kind of even as I got older and would go out with friends, I was always one making sure everyone got home safely and the designated driver and kind of always defaulted to that kind of mother, make sure everyone's okay role.
Right. Nice. I love that. So it's cool that the moon like is the ruler of the 10th house of like career and reputation, and it's in the fifth house of children. And then on top of that, you have the ruler of your ascendant is Venus, which is in the fourth house, which is usually associated with family to begin with. So just the general topic of family should be more important to you than it is necessarily for other people.
Yeah, I'd say I'm very loyal and very like again, of my very large family, I and my kids always show up to all the family events with some of my younger cousins or, out living their lives or have moved away. But I'm pretty loyal to family and put family first.
Got it. Okay. So you have three of your own children, and then did you get into surrogacy after that?
Yes.
Okay. And how recently or how long ago was that?
So that was the first one was in 2018 and the second one was in 2020 when those babies were born. So it was, a year and some change earlier when we started the process.
2018 and 2020. So that's like Saturn going through Capricorn and then Saturn sort of moving into Aquarius a little bit in 2020.
Yeah.
What was the circumstance? Like, I know some people will have done that for like a close family member who can't conceive, or they've done it for like a friend. What was the circumstance that brought that about for you?
I was actually going through a very, very challenging time, trying to get divorced, very on the edge of going into bankruptcy, working in nonprofits, not really making enough money. And heard a podcast episode about surrogacy. And I was like, huh, well, I'm kind of reproductively privileged in that I had, complication-free pregnancies and deliveries and didn't mind it. I was like, well, that's something I could possibly do that might really help me pull me and my family out of the kind of desperate situation we were in at the time.
Hmm.
Um, and I made jokes around my office that I was thinking about renting out my uterus. And a coworker actually came up to me and said, "Were you serious about that? Because I think I have some people looking. I have a friend who's looking for a uterus." And she had a childhood friend that she'd grown up with, and he and his husband were looking for a gestational carrier to carry their child. And we ended up meeting on Valentine's Day, I think 2017, and met for the first time and talked about it and ended up agreeing to go forward with the surrogacy. And then I carried both of the children for the same family.
Okay, got it. It was the same family. So Valentine's Day 2017, is that what you said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that gives us a time frame for sort of like the beginning of that whole journey when you first met them. That's funny. So Jupiter was at 23 Libra. It was like retrograding and conjoining your Saturn, which is the ruler of your fifth house. Um, the transiting Sun was conjoining your Moon in the fifth house that day, and Mercury was just passing your natal Mercury in the fifth house. Interesting. Okay. So we've got some stuff going on there that makes sense. Um, how did it go? So you had the first one in 2018, you said?
That's right.
Okay. Um, so 2018 and then 2020. Uh, when when was the 2021?
August 15th, 2020.
Okay. So that was had Saturn left Aquarius and gone back into Capricorn at that point. Yeah, because Saturn dipped into your fifth house then earlier that year when you were uh, pregnant, and then it went back into your fourth house, and then went back into your fifth house finally in like the end of that year. Um, what was the I'm curious about that Saturn transit. Like, did it go smoothly with especially the final one? Was there because sometimes when I see Saturn stuff going on with the fifth house, sometimes it can be either be complications or it can just be that's like the ending point. If that was like the last child that you had at that time, what was going on and what was the second, or I guess even both? I guess I assume the first time went relatively well. Did the second time go well also?
Yeah, both times went well. It was COVID, so there was more complications of like they didn't want to let the parents be in the room for the delivery. But then they did let one of them come in at the last minute. I was in labor longer with that last baby than for all the other four babies I'd previously had combined. I generally
Got
had
it.
pretty fast labor, and that one just went on and on and on.
Yeah.
So I was in labor longer, but I got an epidural, so that was nice. It was my only epidural experience, and yeah, there was it was a little bit of challenge at the end, but with the placenta, but there was no major complications. Like it didn't want to come out, but it did.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I had my tubes tied after I was done delivering that baby because I was definitely done having babies at that point
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
for
You had your
myself
tube.
or anyone else.
When did you have your tubes tied? Is that like directly after? giving
Yep, they
birth,
just
or was that like
wheeled
later
me
on?
over, just wheeled me over after I delivered the baby.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so that really was then the end of you doing like childbirth, which is something. When was the first time you had your first child?
My first child was born November 15th, 2009.
Okay, 2009. So yeah, more than a decade of, yeah, like having giving birth five different times, and then essentially this Saturn transit, because Saturn actually was in August, was going over, it was like right on top of your Venus, the ruler of your ascendant, at 26 Capricorn, and Saturn was at 26 Capricorn, and then squaring your Saturn at 21 Libra, and then you have a mutual reception actually between Venus and Saturn. So that's actually pretty cool between the ruler of the ascendant and the ruler of the fourth and fifth houses. But then part of this Saturn transit going from your fourth house to your fifth house in 2020 was that the last one you ran into the most sort of challenges of any that you would run into in terms of the process of giving birth, and then also that was the end point, and you decided not to have any more children after that.
That's right.
Amazing. That's beautiful. Nice. I like that. Well, that's pretty impressive and straightforward, and yeah, we can see sort of the prominence of the fifth house, both as a natal signature, especially with the moon there. And the moon, one of the things I've come to understand is just wherever it is in the chart, the process of like nurturing or taking care of things is more prominent in some way. And that can manifest in a number of different ways. But here with it in the fifth house for you, that's what it is for you. And it's also tied up with your sort of like career and your life's work in some sense, since the moon is the ruler of the 10th house. So that's really cool, both as a natal signature as well as in terms of the transits and everything else.
Yeah, it was a decade where I was pretty much either pregnant or nursing, taking care of babies, pretty much straight through. But the surrogacy was really connects interesting because the money that I received as compensation for the first surrogacy helped me to start my own business and leave my nonprofit job, which completely
Mm,
did turn around my family's financial situation. And the stipend that came in for the second surrogacy is what got us through COVID because all of my work pretty much was canceled overnight because I'd been working with groups of people in person. And so that is what kept my family afloat because my unemployment ran out in February of 2020. And so I was eligible, but I could not get through to get my case processed because I was in a special circumstance for being a self-employed, starting my own business. My state had a special program, but I could never get through on the phones. But so the money from the surrogacy is what kept me and my family afloat through lockdown. I
mm.
was finally able to get back to work virtually on Zoom, which is where I've spent most of my days now. So it was a familial thing, and it also was a very supportive thing for giving me a foundation to support the launching of my own business.
That's beautiful. Okay, so it wasn't just having children as like part of your life work, but it would actually influenced your career and your work in general, like ha being able to be in that surrogacy role. So it tied in the 10th house in more ways than one.
Yeah, I don't know financially how we would have gotten through either of those periods without that additional support. It really was an incredible gift for this family, who's a lovely family, and we've stayed in touch and are good friends. And it also was really an amazing gift for my family and helped us really turn our economic situation around and help me launch my business.
Got it. I love that. That's amazing. Um, and I'm sure there was like, I'm just looking at transits and stuff, but I'm sure there was other like perfections and other Time Lord things going on with zodiac releasing and other stuff, which I won't attempt to get into here. The other point that was relevant is I'm just impressed at how Saturn's ruling the fifth house and it's in the first house. And one of the ancient significations that Vedius Valens gives for Saturn that I always thought was curious, and wasn't really sure how that worked out, is he said the fathers of other people's children, and that actually manifested here in a very unique way through literally through surrogacy.
Interesting. Yeah, you
Yeah.
did a reading for me maybe a year and a half ago on one of these webinars where we went through my annual perfections with the launching of my business. It was really fascinating too.
What was the end result of that in terms of how did it line up?
It just lined up with my annual perfections of when I launched my business and met my business partner in a seventh house annual perfection and kind of I can't remember all the details now
Sure,
on the
no problem.
spot, but
Yeah,
it
my
was really interesting
memories.
how that all lined up. I'll have to go back and find that recording.
Nice, nice. Yeah, my memory is not very good these days, but yeah, I'm sure there's some interesting stuff there. Yeah, well, this is a great example, and that's definitely very unique, but like fit your chart in a perfect way, both as a natal signature and yeah, as a transit. So thanks for sharing that because that actually really helps. And I might have to ask if I could use that in the fifth house example episode itself, just because that's a really good example of, different things related to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Amazing. All right. That was a really, really excellent example. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for is just, because I spend time, I've been like, um, refamiliarizing myself with like Reddit lately, and there's a lot of forums where people that don't know astrology will post their chart in like the Ask Astrologers subreddit and just say, why did this unique thing happen in my life that was something that was unique and characteristic of their life overall. And they'll just post the natal chart without any transit or anything else. And for me as an astrologer at this stage, it's fun to glance at the chart and to have like pre my ideas about what I would expect to see, which I'll try to think about when I read the headline before I look at the chart, and then I'll look at the chart and either sometimes that's confirmed or other times it's something unique that I didn't expect, especially if I've never thought about that scenario before or never seen other examples with it. So it's fun sometimes to look at charts like that, and that's kind of what I'm going for here a little bit today. So if other people have other good examples of some unique circumstance where we could just look at the birth chart and try to identify what that's from or what's indicating that, then go ahead and submit that by clicking the Q&A button now. So there was one more person I was going to talk to about a transit example, and that was Selena. Selena, are you ready to join me as a panelist? Hey,
I am sorry. I think you can hear me now.
yeah, what's your birth data?
April the 8th, 1984, and Columbus, Indiana, 3:42 p.m.
All right. Is your ascendant 7 degrees of Virgo?
Yes.
All right, so you have Virgo rising, and you had a 11th house example that related to the recent Mars retrograde in Cancer, followed by the Jupiter-Venus conjunction more recently in Cancer, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, so one of my good friends from my childhood, she and I were really close, and we both went through divorces 3 or 4 years ago and reconnected, and it was great. And I actually met my current boyfriend when I was with her. We were out, and then all of a sudden, the past like year, we were just distancing ourselves, and she just dropped off. We had a kind of a fight, and then I just decided, okay, we'll see if anything comes of it. Then she reached back out in June, and she invited me on a trip with her family, and it's like we're better friends than before. And also like other friend groups have also popped out of nowhere, and like it there's but then my relationship is going through stuff because I also have Venus at 1 degree of Aries, so
Hmm.
there's other things going on there. But
Right.
yeah.
So the initial falling out happened when Mars was in Cancer. It happened late last year, early this year.
It happened when it happened probably, gosh, actually I don't know exactly what we think. It probably happened in June, January of last year.
Okay.
January,
January of
February.
2024.
No, of this year. I mean, I'm sorry, of earlier this year. That's what I meant.
Okay.
So
Yeah, yeah.
February, yeah.
Got it.
February
Yeah. So
there.
that was when Mars retrograded back into Cancer. I'll put up a transit chart right now. Okay, so like January, yeah, January, Mars is already, it's retrograded back into Cancer and into your 11th whole sign house. And that's the place of friends and groups for you. And that's where you have your moon in the 11th house, and it's opposite to your Jupiter in the fifth house. And yeah, so the Mars retrograde is like your friend suddenly removes herself from your life, essentially.
Yeah. And there wasn't like a lot of control I had over it. She was just like, I just don't feel connected with you anymore. I have other priorities in my life. And I was like, okay, but it was a lot of stuff, a few things leading up to that. So I did the same thing. I just kind of went off the grid with her, and then out of nowhere she reached back out. I figured it would happen eventually, but I just didn't know when and if we would even be friends that close after. But she did, and it was like, I miss you so much. I love you. Like it was like a, why did I do that? And the reflection was good, and I feel like we're closer than we were before.
Got it. Okay. So, and Mars retrograded back and it's stationed direct at 17 degrees of Cancer in February, which is actually very close to the ruler of your 11th house, which is the moon. So that was the separation. And Mars is always classically like a severing and separating type archetype. So that even in some of the ancient Egyptian texts, like 2000 years ago, they used Mars. The symbol for Mars was a knife. So sometimes there's these separations that occurred, but then you said it was in June that she reached back out to you. So June is, yeah, right when Jupiter went
Yeah.
into Cancer, and that was something I talked about a lot in the forecasts and stuff that I've been really interested in tracking, which was how Mars was breaking things or severing things in a certain spot in our chart based on that retrograde from last fall through the early part of this year, in this case in your 11th house, but then how Jupiter would move in there and fix things and clean things up again. So she reached out to you in June.
Uh, Early June. So right before, interestingly, right before Jupiter went into Cancer. So it wasn't exactly, yeah, it was like early. I don't know the exact. It was like right the first week of June. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. So she reaches out and you go through the process of reconciling.
yeah, we meet.
Jupiter went in the
Mhm.
ninth and 10th. You meet up and then, yeah, you said things now are over the process of, I'm assuming the summer have become better than ever.
Yeah, yeah. She's back to being one of my best friends, and it was almost like we've both grown from the process because there were some things we had hangups on that we both addressed. So I think that was good for us. And it was relationship related with her and with me, and yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Nice. And what, like, what's her, without going into too many details, like, what's her rising sign?
Libra.
Libra. Okay, so she's Libra rising. So the Mars retrograde was in her 10th house, but then also squaring her ascendant descendant axis, probably. So bringing in some of those tensions there. Interesting. All right. Well, that's a pretty good example. And then I don't know whether to ask about like the other stuff since that's probably ongoing, but yeah, you've had Saturn and Neptune like stationing on your Venus this summer, so that's tricky to deal with.
Yeah, it's been like I feel like my boyfriend just keeps trying to break up with me, and I'm confused too. Like, what are we doing? Where are we going? And we live together, and but then he doesn't want to, and then he does, and I think he's confused too, and I'm confused. We've been together almost 4 years, so
Hmm.
um, it's just one of those things that I think is just we have to wait it out and maybe wait for and a lot. And it's funny because as soon as Saturn went retrograde over um my Venus, I think that's when things got we revisited the conversation of just of just ending it. And I don't know. Yeah, like we'll see.
Right, I forgot. So that's so Venus. slowed down and stationed in early Aries this spring and then retrograded over your natal Venus and back into your seventh house. So that whole retrograde was already very relationship oriented for you. And then here we have like Saturn coming off of a long transit through your seventh house over the past couple of years. It's March of 2023, but already immediately like moving in and stationing on top of your Venus, which can sometimes cool things off in terms of relationships. But also with Neptune, you have a natal Venus Neptune square from 1 degree of Aries to 1 degree of Capricorn. And that's getting emphasized because now you're at your Neptune square and it's really activating that combination and creating a lot of ambiguity surrounding relationships. Um, that's an interesting like signature because I've been actually thinking about that signature a lot because there was some viral stuff this summer with like people talking about like limerence and people sometimes falling in love with people and having a really idealized view of the relationship or over idealized. And I forgot that that can sometimes be a thing with Venus Neptune aspects. Has that been something that's come up for you in terms of relationships, or how has that worked out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of my biggest flaws when it comes to relationships is that I over romanticize. Sometimes I make stuff up in my head because in my birth chart, Venus and Neptune are at an exact square. So
Mhm.
it's like, and I feel like that right now is even more prominent because, of course, Neptune is squaring Neptune right on top of Venus. So there's just, I feel like it's unclear these things are unclear. And
Right.
I can be a little too forgiving on things or yeah, maybe not. The Virgo ascendant in me wants to know everything. And I feel like it's just hard with that. I can't even really explain it right now. So that's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully this is like the high point of it. So Saturn's going to, retrograde back into you. I've noticed a lot of people that have been dealing with some of the stuff with the Pisces transits over the past few years, that a lot of that is sort of culminating soon because I can see Saturn is about to retrograde back into Pisces, and then we're going to have eclipses there next month in Pisces and Virgo. So that could be the important turning point for you just in terms of making some final decisions about things one or another. And while some of that's happening in the seventh house of relationships, since we're also having Virgo eclipses, there's also sometimes a focus on defining like who you are and what you want and going through a process sometimes of changes, of major changes, not just in relationships, but also in terms of defining your own identity more clearly and figuring out what you want. So that might be part of what you're dealing with next month as well.
Right. And it's kind of interesting because when it was reversed, I think 7 years ago, or how long, back in 2017, 2018, that's when I went through my divorce. Um, or at least when I found out about my ex-husband's infidelity and a bunch of other stuff, and
Mm,
tried to make it work. So that was when the eclipses were happening on the opposite side, where the South Node was um, in Pisces and the North Node was in Virgo, and it was kind of flipped. So I'm hoping this scenario, maybe it would mean the other thing. Instead of going through a breakup, it means we'll just recommit and move in, like we'll just move forward, but we'll see.
yeah, well, that'll be the choice, or I guess the decision that you'll have to make next month, just in terms of what feels good for you and what makes sense. But that is really cool. The Yeah, the 11th house thing was really cool because that was just a perfect demonstration of, I think, what I was talking about in a lot of the forecast last year about the sequence of what I was expecting. So I'm glad to see that that actually did play out that way in some people's charts, and I'm glad to hear that you and your friend reconciled, since I'm sure
Yeah.
that's helpful in terms of, going through other things at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I remember that forecast and I made a note of it in my head, and that's why I wanted to say something because I didn't know if it would actually come to fruition, and yet it did. So, yeah.
Yeah, good. I love that. Thanks for that confirmation.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks
All
for
right.
talking to me and thanks for
Thank
sharing your
you.
chart.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much.
All right. Did anybody else have? I guess I did a bunch of webinars already on that, but I'm curious, especially with the Venus Jupiter conjunction happening recently. if other people have been experiencing something being fixed or being repaired or improved that got broken or where issues arose late, like last year from like September forward into February or March in the Cancer house of your chart versus getting fixed since June, July, and August in that same sector with the Venus Jupiter conjunction taking place. So if anybody has an example of that, let me know, just because it would be interesting to see some other variations of that. All right, so let me take a look at some of the other submissions. Steven, who submitted in the Q&A, could you tell me your rising sign in the chat? Capricorn rising. Okay, I think I want to talk to you about that just because it's a great third house example of like somebody might ask like why do I, if you didn't know astrology, you'd be like why do I have seven or six siblings? And the answer would be that you have a very active third house or very prominent third house. I'm going to promote you to a panelist right now.
Oh,
Hey,
hiya.
thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Sorry, it's a bit dark here.
That's okay. What's your birth data?
So 16th of February, 1996, 5:21 a.m. in London, England.
Is your ascendant 12 degrees of Capricorn?
Yep, that's correct.
So here's your chart, and you're the oldest of six siblings.
Yeah, I've got six siblings. Yeah.
Okay, so that's you know pretty unique. Like not everybody has six siblings, and you're the signature for that in your chart, which I was interested by, is that you have not just the ruler of the ascendant in the third house with Capricorn rising and Saturn in Pisces, but you actually have a mutual reception between the ruler of the third house and the ruler of the first house, which is Jupiter, the ruler of the third house of siblings, is in the first house in Capricorn. So in the houses series, when I was going through examples, I kept seeing that come up over and over again, that a very prominent or unique part of a person's life sometimes happens when there's a mutual reception between two houses because it more closely links the topics of those houses. So, yeah, how has that worked out for you, or what has it been like having six siblings?
I love it. I've really, really, yeah, I just really enjoy the fact that I have a large family. They play a big role in my life, all my siblings. So interestingly enough as well, even though I live in a really big city where it's often hard to live close to your family, my family's
Hmm,
2 minutes away. So they're within
nice.
walking distance. So that's, I guess it's one of the ways I've experienced Venus as the most beneficial planet in my chart, being in the fourth house and yeah, being able to, yeah, have a home that I feel really fortunate for. Yeah, but I mean that reception, mutual reception between the two has also manifested in lots of other ways in terms of also the importance of uh, like working with communities and kind of also just like my general life direction, kind of being really colored by, yeah, not just first and third house, but also that mutual generosity between Mars and Venus as well, having a say in that with Mars ruling my MC. But I don't want to get off topic
Nice.
up there.
No, that's great. Yeah, exchanging signs between those. What other community things have you, what community work have you done that connects to the third house?
So actually, initially, I did a lot of work around identity, which I guess is quite first house.
Mm,
So I at first was doing a lot of stuff around like with arts and cultures around African, like working with other African diasporic artists and academics. Since then, I've gone into anthropology. So I do research in anthropology, and actually, the focus of my research is working with online communities that are interested in matters of Indigenous knowledge systems through language. So I guess it's kind of third housey as well, but the way that
nice.
they kind of connect with a deep past through studying linguistics. Yeah, I, that sounds really abstract, but yeah, that's what I'm doing at the
No, that's
moment.
perfect. With the third house and communication,
Mm.
as well as having the ruler of the 10th sign being Venus in the fourth house. And it seems like a lot of those things are coming through in ways that are like very literal.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It's all very much. I didn't mention, but the what I'm studying as well in my research is actually like my own ancestral like roots. So I'm
Mm,
working with a community that I share heritage with, which also feels very fourth housey.
absolutely. I love that. What are we don't have to go out into it if you don't want, but have there been challenges that have come up in the context of the third house as well, just with Saturn being there in a night chart, or have there been ways in which you've yourself been the source of some issues that have arose in that area somehow?
Mm, I mean, I would say it came out strongest in my earliest years. So I had a really tough time in primary school, actually.
Mm,
And that was actually rooted in communication. So because I came from a bilingual home and I was the firstborn and my parents were migrants into the country, I didn't actually have the greatest command of the English language. I had a tendency of mixing in my mother tongue, and that actually made it a bit hard. So I kind of so even though I could understand, I actually lost a lot of confidence in my speech. So there was like a period between like 4 to 6 years old and the first couple of years in primary school where I actually didn't talk much, and I felt, yeah, I struggled a lot with yeah, being bullied a bit as well. So primary school was really tough for me. But
mm,
interestingly enough, when I had my Jupiter return and we moved to another continent, we moved actually to East Africa. That was actually quite redemptive for me because it was the first time that I went into a school and I didn't like get picked on, and I actually had a really positive school experience. But that only started after my Jupiter return. Then it went downhill again towards the end of high school, but it was generally schooling at the beginning was difficult. But university's been actually the second time round better because the first time round I also had to drop out from university because I had a tough time, not because of bullying, but other reasons. So yeah, but I mean, yeah, the only what I did think was interesting was that it took a while for the beneficence of the mutual reception to show up. I felt like I needed like a
mm.
Jupiter cycle. And I remember also in Austin Kopek's book, when he talks about this Saturn being in this last deck, and he talks about having a tough start at the beginning and things getting better. And my Saturn return has actually been really positive. Um, I had left the country on my second Jupiter return and actually came back to the country. It's like back to London when Saturn came back to the third house. So I was back in my local neighborhood instead of, I guess, living abroad or elsewhere. And my siblings have actually played an important role in my ability to stay in university, despite being a mum of 3 kids now. So, uh,
Nice. In terms of like financial support or in other ways?
no, not financial support, actually helping you with childcare and being there and being able to like help me care for my family. So my siblings are a lot younger than me, but well, not that much, but yeah. So yeah, kind of getting support in that way where they actually show up for me by making sure I can go to classes because they watch over my like help me with childcare with my young like because my children are quite young and they were too
Nice.
young to go into well, I couldn't afford nursery, so yeah.
Nice. That's incredible. That's such a great literal manifestation. And yeah, I mean Saturn for all people tends to get better as you get older and but it can be really tough, especially when you're younger. And it's interesting that the core issue to a certain extent was like communication with Saturn in the third house and then experiencing negative things from people in primary school during the early part of your life. But then, yeah, that being something eventually, which is another Saturn thing, which is an area of difficulty or where somebody struggles with something early in life, but then eventually becomes a strength. I posted about that recently because somebody asked in a thread somewhere about that, I think on Reddit, about like what's a placement in your chart that was negative or difficult early in life, but then later became a strength. And I had something similar with the Mercury Saturn conjunction in the 10th house. And I was very fearful of talking in groups or in public when I was younger. And then eventually that was something that I eventually overcome. And now, obviously, it's something that I do as part of my job on a regular basis, as part of my career. So it's really interesting sometimes how Saturn placements can indicate something that's a difficulty or a challenge or a real hardship in a really literal way, sometimes early in life, but then eventually can become a source of strength and inspiration. And that's clearly what it's become for you, especially to the extent that you're incorporating that into your career and your work now.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah. Thank you.
Nice, awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear how far through your degree are you? I see Saturn's about to retrograde back into your third house in September, and you're also getting eclipses between your third and your ninth house. So are you at a important turning point with that, or where are you at with your Saturn return?
Yeah, it's really funny you mentioned that. So I am at a very important turning point because I actually recently got awarded a scholarship to continue into a PhD, and that starts just after the eclipses end. So I'll be beginning end of September, and yeah, I mean, I got
Oh, wow.
news of it. Well, I got news of the first offer of a scholarship just after the eclipses, and that was happening right next to my Venus. It was that eclipse that took place in March,
Yeah,
and
right.
then
So one of
yeah,
them would have been one of them was on your Venus, and then the other one around that time was in Virgo, which would have been
next
your 10th house.
Saturn. It was also next to Saturn. It was right. So the Virgo eclipse was opposing was had Saturn activated. It was right next to that degree, and then the second one
Hmm.
was um, right next to Venus. And yeah, that was a crazy time that I gave birth to my third child, and then I did the interview and I got that offer, and then yeah, so that's been the turning point. And yes,
Wow.
so that will be starting a new journey.
That's incredible. Yeah, you're going to be starting your PhD while Saturn retrogrades back into Pisces for the very end of your Saturn return, and as eclipses are taking place in your third house of communication and your ninth house of education. So
Yeah,
that's literally like you couldn't get any more literal and like straightforward than that, but it's really manifesting those placements in your chart in a really great and really beautiful way.
thank you. Yeah, I feel extremely fortunate. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Well, I think that's great. I want to end on a high note just because that's such a perfect example. I can't think of it. I'm sure there's other stuff we could find, but I can't think of it getting any better than that. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it too. Take care.
Yeah. All right. Take care. All right. That was amazing. So that's actually two examples then we have of, yeah, mutual receptions. And that was something I always knew was important, but I think last year when I did the houses series just came through super strongly in terms of how much mutual receptions can link together the topics of two houses and make those two parts of the life overlap in really striking ways, but it can also just make the topics of those houses stand out so much more prominently in the life, so much so that it becomes one of the most characteristic signatures about the life when there is a mutual reception between two houses. And now we've seen that, yeah, in some pretty striking ways. Okay, so let me see where we're at, and let me see if there's other ones in the Q&A like that where somebody has a short one sentence, but characteristic and unique thing about something that's happened in their life. Hmm, that's an interesting example. Katrina, who says both my dog and my cat unexpectedly came into my life during Venus retrograde in 2015 and 2023 on the exact same degree of Leo. I'm a Cancer rising, so it was in my second house. I don't believe much was going on in my sixth house during those times. Um, yeah, I don't know what that would be, but that is interesting. I mean, maybe we could take a look at it. Do you want to join me? Are you still here? Hey, thanks for joining me.
Hi, great to be here.
All right, what's your birth data?
May 22nd, 1986 at 9:28 a.m. in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
20 Cancer rising?
Yes.
All right, so the premise is you said that in 2015 and 2023, when Venus went retrograde in Leo, you got your cat in one instance and your dog in another, but you're not sure why that was since it was just Venus retrograde in your second house.
hmm Yeah.
So tell me
Yeah.
the setup or what was the rest of what was
Yeah.
the
And,
order?
and also through friends. So I ended up foster failing both of them. But my
Say that
dog was
again.
in,
For some reason, I got interrupted for a second.
oh, sorry. Yeah. My dog was in 2015. Um, some friends found her on the side of the road when they were traveling and rescued her and couldn't keep her. So I agreed to take her. And that was in right around this time in 2015. So I believe it was around August 10th in 2015. And then my cat was a similar situation where she was found around the 4th of July in 2023 and needed a foster and a rescue. And that was through a friend of a friend.
In August of 2023.
Yeah, I believe it was around, no, July of 2023. So I think it was around, I cannot remember the date off the top of my head, but yeah, early July. I think it was right at the beginning of
Got
the
it. Okay.
retrograde.
Yeah, yeah.
Trying to remember. Yeah.
So, yeah, so Venus was already, so it was starting the retrograde in Virgo and then retrograding back into your second house and and then stationing direct at like 14, 15. Um, I mean, the only thing I was curious about was that you do have sixth house planets. So you have Saturn in the sixth and Uranus in the sixth in Sagittarius, and the ruler of the sixth is Jupiter in Pisces in the ninth. Um, and so they were both foster animals or rescues.
Yeah, rescues. And both were out of town. So I had to drive a few hours to rescue my cat. And my dog was found across the country through friends who were traveling. So I guess that makes sense with the ninth house. Or I didn't
Yeah,
even think about that.
that's kind of funny that you have the ruler of the sixth and the ninth, and you've had to travel
hmm
to get, especially the second animal.
hmm
So that was in, you said July of 2023.
Yeah, sometime around there. I remember that. Yeah, it was during that retrograde. So sometime in July.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the main thing, I guess, is
hmm
just that this Venus
hmm
retrograde um trines some of those sixth house placements that you already have there, and could be part of why it's activating that. What else is going on? So the ruler, Cancer rising, ruler of the ascendant is the moon, which is in Scorpio in the fifth house. Um, Jupiter's in Pisces, well placed in the ninth. Yeah. I don't know otherwise why that's like a specific signature for you, because it is funny that it's not like in the sixth house. It's just that it's kind of like trining your sixth house planets. But and it only relates to those two repetitions, right? Like you haven't had that going like further back into what was before that, 2007, for example, or 1999,
hmm
right?
Yeah, I believe my family adopted a dog in around that time in 1999, but I cannot remember the date, so
Okay.
I'll have to ask my mom, see if she remembers. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, that's funny. So
But
maybe it's almost like a repetition of
mhm.
a pattern that's been going back earlier in your life, perhaps connecting events. But that's is one of the interesting things about Venus retrogrades is sometimes just that it establishes a repetition that then plays out under subsequent retrogrades for some reason whenever that same repetition repeats.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Let me see the chat. Has anybody in the chat got an opinion about what's going on here, or is anybody seeing things that I am not seeing? Um, Amelia says I'm Cancer rising, and that Venus retrograde was very prominent for me, so I'm curious. So let's back it up to 2023. Um, Amelia says another fellow Cancer rising is Scorpio moon, and she works with dogs. All right. I don't think anybody else has a opinion, so we'll have to see what happens when I post this on YouTube, and maybe other people will find something that I'm not noticing. But right now, that's all I'm getting is just that it does trine your sixth house, and that could be part of it for some reason that I'm not fully seeing.
Mhm. Cool. Thanks very much. I appreciate.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. All right, cool. So let me go back to the Q&A. So Aisha says, I was attacked by police while protecting my son in 2015. It took 6 years to recover, but it lit up my career since 2019. All right. Let me promote you to a panelist if you're up for sharing. I guess the fifth house is what I would be curious about in that instance, but I don't otherwise know offhand what I would expect to see other than some sort of difficulties going on with the fifth house. Although if it ties it, it might tie in the 10th house at the same time. Although I'm not sure if it would be through a signature or through a transit.
Oh, hi.
Hey, all right. What is your birth data?
It's March 5th, 1977. I was born in Eugene, Oregon, and at 12:20 p.m.
March 5th, 1977. That's right on the Venus retrograde of 77 in Aries. Um, Hold on a second. Is your ascendant 8 degrees of Cancer?
Yes.
All right. So your ascendant is Cancer. Um, we're kind of talking about your fifth house. And because the synopsis that you gave again, just in case I edit it and start from here, um, the synopsis you gave was you were attacked by police while protecting your son in 2015, and it took 6 years to recover, but it totally lit up your career since 2019.
It did,
So,
yeah.
okay, so I was curious what was going on with your fifth house. So, Scorpio is your fifth house. There's Uranus there at 11 degrees of Scorpio. Um, the ruler of the fifth house is Mars, which is at 18 Aquarius, and it's opposite Saturn at 11 degrees of um, 11 degrees of Leo, which is squaring the Uranus very closely. So you have a natal Saturn Uranus square, and then Mars is also ruling the 10th whole sign house. And that was the thing that I noticed when you mentioned your birth date is just that Venus, yeah, Venus is just 10 days from stationing retrograde in Aries. So you're born very close to the Venus retrograde in Aries. So what was the circumstance and what happened and what was the time frame that we're talking about in 2015?
It was July 15th, and my son was having a mental health crisis, and it was like in Eugene, there's a 24-hour crisis hotline, and it wasn't 24 hours at the time. It was just closing. 15 minutes before I called them, they were closing. So I called them to help me try to get my son to the hospital. And because they were closing, when I called the non-emergency hotline, some background, I have a nursing degree. I had experience with this. It was not an emergency at the time. I just needed help. to get
Mm.
him from the house to the hospital in a protected way. So this is why I called the non-emergency call. Anyway, I called them and they decided that instead of calling the crisis hotline for mental health, to call the police instead. So
Mm.
the police arrived at our house and, as the story goes, escalated everything, and ended up trying to tase my son, although we were not aggressive in any way. It's all in all of this anyway. Tried to tase my son. I got in front of my son and I said, if you can't tase him, you can't tase me. I'm not doing anything. And so then someone came from behind me, jumped me, attacked me, big old policeman attacked me. There was three of them. They had called backup, I guess. I don't know. It was just me. I'm 5'3". I weighed 135 pounds at the time. My
Mm.
son, football player, young, he was 19 at the time. Anyway, make a long story short, we were attacked. I was beat up really badly, had a concussion. I don't remember 2016, hardly at all. Started to recover in 2017. My son's okay. He did fine. Everything was fine. We went to court, tried to sue them 2 years later, and lost. And we were in the newspaper across the country. And a quote from the juror said, I feel really bad for her, but I just can't believe a police officer would do something like that. And
Mm.
so they ended up closing the case. I lost the case. That, of course, took me into a spin of depression. I was working for the state at the time, working with police, working with children. So I kind of went in a kind of dark spin. Of course, I was still recovering from a major concussion. My right side of my body was acting crazy, learning how to walk and do all the things. And so it kind of broke this naivete, I guess I had about my son. He was like a awarded football player and like top person in his school, and everyone loved him. And I was like the state worker that was known throughout the city to do all these beautiful things and for the community. And my brother and my family was well involved, and anyway. So I just thought the naivete of the moment it became a racial situation and we were attacked that way, it kind of broke my mind. And I say broke, meaning that like the naivete just lifted. And
Mm.
from there, I just did like an about face of how I would address the issue in the community, all of the issues in the community, mothering, mental health, protection, just all the things. And then that's where, years after I had recovered, I started to write for the local newspaper, then it started to go national. Started a podcast, it was going, so everything from there just kind of blew up, and that's how that connection happened.
Got it.
So it
Okay.
might not just be fifth house.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there because even just because I noticed two things just about the July date that were tricky. I mean, one of them is there was a Mercury Mars conjunction that was going exact that day within like 24 hours in your first house. So you have Cancer rising, and we see transiting Mercury was at 13 Cancer, and it was applying to conjoin Mars at 14 Cancer. And by the next day, by July 16th, that conjunction had happened and was separating. So it's like that's the getting tackled by police officers and suffering a concussion, negative, challenging aspect that's happening to you personally in terms of your body. And then also I can see Saturn, the sun is at 23 Cancer and Saturn is at 28 Scorpio. And whenever the sun gets close to a trine with Saturn or Jupiter, that means that Saturn or Jupiter is going to station really soon. So we can see that Saturn's in your fifth house of children at that time, but it means that Saturn is about to station. And indeed, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Yeah, Saturn stations just like a week or two later in your fifth house, just in late July and early August. And then at the same time, let's see, Venus is going retrograde in your third house and your second house. So, yeah, we can see some of the transits that were going on at that time just in terms of tying bringing out some of those topics. But then in terms of what happened from 2019 forward, I'm a little bit less clear aside from that, because that's a long time frame to jump from 2015 to, like you said, it was from like 2019 forward, things really began to change.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to break it down slow and do it, it was, we got the lawsuit wrapped up and the decision was made in 2008, in 2018. And then
Mm,
what I did was quit my job on a medical leave. I didn't, I mean, I took a medical leave knowing that I was going to quit, but I took a medical leave that went into another year and a half, 2 years of just medical leave. So the income went down a little bit because I was on the medicals. When you said Saturn in the second house, I was like, okay. And then from there, when I started to actually decide I couldn't go back to work at the same place for the state, I actually tried to move away from Oregon where all this happened. And I ended up having to come right back within 8 months because my other child had become pregnant and she was homeless and like having a really hard time. So I had to come right back to the situation. And that was in 2000, that was 2019. At 2000, yeah, 19. And then into 2020, there was a lot of family, still children stuff going on. The grandchildren started to become a bigger situation in my life. And then all of that whole time that my children were like, we're, we were having a hard time just recovering from all the things. My career was actually going up and up and up, meaning I was
mm,
actually expressing through writing, through podcasting, not knowing at all what I'm doing, just like writing it and people are picking it up and it's going. Very little effort, but it was all
nice.
expression of everything that I had been through going forward. And then it just kind of developed from there. The whole time, the family still, the children still being kind of I don't want to say in the background, but like the personal factor was the children having to really deal with the loss and all the things that were happening. And I mean, every time you were saying something, I was like, I have an example. I have an example. These last 10 years have been just event after event after event in this way. So it's
Mm,
interesting how my curiosity was from that moment, how quickly everything was unfolding into where I'm at now, where I mentioned in another example that, I have separated myself completely from that space personally. I still work there talking about this kind of stuff still, but I'm like in another country completely. And so everything has unfolded in such a strange way, but there has literally not been a gap of time where it has just been peaceful and not connected to that, letting go that trauma from there. So that's why I was
mm.
trying to figure out how the connection went.
Got it. Well, that's
Yeah.
cool that part of what came out of it is you writing and speaking and communicating through writing and through podcasting, just having the ruler of the ascendant being the moon, which is in Virgo in the third whole sign house. And like one of our last examples, communication then starting to become a big part of your life in a significant way. Is that still something you're doing?
Yes, that is something I'm absolutely doing. I'm writing a book. I always listen to you and Kafik talk about this book. It is like following me everywhere. I need to write this book. So I have like, almost half of a book written and I write for two different publications in two different places. And I'm trying to write here in Europe and trying to get started in that more. But the writing is what keeps pushing. I'm honestly, I'm here for the expression. So whatever comes up, I'm here. So I'm coaching now. I do leadership coaching that actually helps businesses deal with people with the staff that they have going through a traumatic situation like the world we live in and having the leadership be able to respond to that trauma. So that's what
Mm,
I'm doing now, like my bread and butter, but the writing still backs that up and the podcasting still backs that up too. And I'm doing that on a weekly basis. So yeah, it's still there.
nice. That's perfect. I love that. Well, it's interesting how that helped to unlock, even though it was very traumatic, to push you in that direction where you then unlocked something that was sort of there in your chart, sort of waiting to be awakened. Um, as well as just how that was such an example of something that's become so much more common and recognized, which is just police being called in America, police being called in inappropriate like mental health situations and where it should be something else and where that's not always necessarily helpful and sometimes can be really, really harmful and really dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. It's not, it's a good, for me, the miracle of it all is that I was able to regain who I am and take it and say, I can help other people with this thing. And so, and I know that's there in the chart somewhere. And so it's just, that's the part where I feel super, super, like just absolutely grateful for that to be the result of all of this. So it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with, I mean, it's interesting just how, on a very simple level, some of that is just Mars ruling your fifth house and your 10th house in a day chart, and there being a really challenging negative event that happened in with respect to that, but how it did end up subsequently connecting the fifth house of children and the 10th house of career in that really striking way and unlocking other parts of your chart. Um, yeah, so I'm glad you were able to take at least something positive from it and hopefully help other people going forward by just communicating and sharing your voice.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Cool. All right. Thank you for sharing that example. I appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
All right. Let me see what the live chat is saying. Amelia, who has 15 Cancer rising in the live chat, said they remember that month and they were suffering from work-related injuries. So that's interesting. Vera says, I would love to see the zodiac releasing. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there was some really interesting stuff going on with the zodiac releasing, which is sometimes how we can study more long, not just periods of time, but like huge blocks of a person's life and changing points from one chapter to another. But that gets kind of complicated and above most of my audience's technical ability. So I'm gonna not go into that today. Um, yeah, great example. All right, let me see where we're at with the other ones. Okay, Monica R, are you still here? Yeah. All right. So I'd like to talk about this one carefully and just with respect to your chart, of course, since we can't necessarily talk about their chart because they're not here, but if we can do that, I think that could be good.
Hi.
All right.
Sorry, I briefly left for some reason, but now I'm back. Hello. I hope you're having a nice day.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me. What's your birth data?
So I am February 29th, 1996 in Valdosta, Georgia, USA. Birth
What
time is 11:05 a.m.
um ascendant at 1 degree of Gemini?
Mhm.
All right, so here's your chart, and this the premise you wrote in the chat was that your partner of 6 years came out as transgender last year, or trans last year, and you said I'm in my first Saturn return in Gemini rising. So, um, let's see. So your chart has Gemini rising, Sagittarius, seventh house, Pluto is there, at 3 degrees of Sag on the descendant. The ruler of the seventh house is Jupiter, which is in Capricorn in the eighth, and let's see, 1996. So how long has your relationship been going on for?
So we met October 17th, 2018. I think it was either that Uranus was conjunct my Venus that month or it was about to go into Taurus.
Hmm.
Um, but I met them after having kind of like just a couple relationships that were really short that didn't work out. And I felt like something was really different about this person. And we had a great start to the relationship. Everything was good. And then for the next couple of years, just the normal ebb and flow of any typical relationship that's long term. And then I think it was June 26th of 2024, she came out to me as transgender. And we had just moved to Denver the previous year in November. And so, yeah, since then, we've just been making adjustments. I've been learning how to do nails and stuff for her, and we've actually just been having a really nice time. I just got her a present of like this little stuffed animal with her pride flag on it
Mm.
for completing 1 year of transition, I think last week.
Nice. All right. Yeah, so so she has been going through the hormone therapy and things like that.
Mhm.
Nice. All right. Awesome. So you said it was June 26, 2024, and trying to look at what was going on in your chart at the time. I see transiting Jupiter or transiting Venus was at 11 degrees of Cancer, and it was exactly opposing your Jupiter at 11 degrees of Capricorn. So it's interesting that that was really one of your closest transits that day. And the other closest transit was the North Node was at 11 degrees of Aries, and it was exactly squaring your Jupiter at 11 Capricorn. So we do have stuff going on with your seventh house ruler at that time. Um,
Oh, okay, yeah. I guess I hadn't noticed that. I have noticed that through the last Mars retrograde as well, this has kind of like shaken up and then also fixed my relationship with my mom. So I
hmm.
thought that was pretty interesting because I had come out to her and this led to an argument later on. I think it was exactly as like Mars was conjunct my moon. And just recently we had a really good conversation and I felt a lot better about our relationship. Just I think it was just yesterday.
Oh, nice. Okay. So that would be, yeah, as Venus and Jupiter are like conjoining on your moon. So you had basically the moon as a general significator for the mother, and then Mars causing tensions between you and like a almost like separation or tension in that relationship, but then Venus and Jupiter coming in and smoothing things over between the two of you.
Yeah.
Nice. That's a good example. And then, oh, right, okay. So with Gemini rising, so Uranus going into Gemini in July was also moving into your first house. So that's part of what's going on here as well. And that would have been getting really close already last year because your Uranus would have made it to like 27, 28 Taurus. So I was looking for like what the larger term, like seventh house, because there hasn't been much happening in Sagittarius over the past year in terms of major transits or major outer planet transits or anything like that. But this could be part of what we're seeing here is just Uranus going into your first house, into your rising sign, and beginning a long transit through there, but also the way that anytime you get an ascendant transit, how that can also impact the seventh house and the descendant at the same time.
Yeah, I have been a little afraid of the Uranus transit, but ever since my partner came out, I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's probably what it's going to be about because I have never been previously out of the closet to really anybody in my personal life. It was always just online.
Hmm.
So this kind of made me have to start telling people, which I thought was interesting.
So that was part of what happened with your mom is you had to come out to her over the past year, and then that initially caused tensions with her, but then you've been working through that.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Now I understand. I guess I wasn't getting that at first, but that makes more sense now. Um, so what is going, okay, that's, yeah, and the eclipses have been taking place have moved into your fourth house, 10th house axis. Although one of the things that's interesting about that is that they've shifted from your fifth house, 11th house axis over the past year in terms of finishing up the Libra eclipses. Was that um was that something that changed? Like, did you before that, in terms of your orientation, consider yourself to be queer like prior to this, or was this just something, did that happen, or is that something that's more recent as a result of your partner going through this transition?
I would say it's definitely more of a recent thing. I am an artist online. I do little drawings, and so I had previously posted for Pride and, said, "Oh, I'm like a demisexual person," but this has made me like actually come out about like my bisexuality and I guess now lesbianism because I think through reevaluating everything, I've had to kind of really do a lot of deep diving within myself and decide like whether or not this was something I was going to be like good with. And yeah, so it's been a lot of soul searching. So I do feel like I've done a lot of uh I've done a lot of like reflection on how I present to others and how express myself as well.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That it's similar to when I did the Uranus and Taurus episode, there was somebody, but for them it was Uranus was going through their seventh house and their partner was having Uranus go through their first house, and the partner was the one that transitioned. But one of the things that came up for um her at the time for the person who was sharing their chart was that they had been in a lesbian relationship and had always conceptualized themselves as a lesbian, but then suddenly they were in a straight relationship and it was a process to go through that. So it's interesting that you had sort of the opposite process, and some of that I think is happening just with the nodes going through your fifth house and having eclipses taking place there, and then the sort of like major endings and major beginnings that can sometimes happen when um, eclipses start happening in the fifth house with respect to topics of sex and sexuality, which is the other part of the fifth house that I'm trying to put together more as I'm working on this fifth house example, besides just talking about children and childbearing and things like that. But like sex and sexual orientation can be part of that as well. So it's interesting how that came up for you over the course of the past year and how one of the primary transits was just like eclipses taking place. Yeah, in your fifth house.
Yeah, that is for sure. I definitely have gone from being somebody that tries to wear really basic things and not really have too much personality to somebody that is starting to be more comfortable being more expressive. So that I would say is probably a good example of that. I've been doing a lot of just artistic expression.
Hmm, nice. And when did that start again? You said, did you say like June of 2024 or what was the date again?
So she came out to me at the end of June of 2024. It
Okay,
was
June of 20.
June, I think it was 26th or 27th.
Got it. So that was yeah, after that set of eclipses had taken place a little bit earlier, which would have been one of the last sets that was fully in Aries and Libra. Um, I mean, I'm curious, I guess without going into too many details, can I ask what their rising sign is?
Virgo with a Virgo stellium.
Virgo with Virgo stellium. So the new eclipses that started taking place last fall then has been taking place in their first house and seventh house. So it's like self, appearance, identity, and also relationships. So that makes a ton of sense for them. Um, yeah, so you both have first house, seventh house stuff going on, and then for you, also fifth house stuff going on. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah. Is there anything else with respect to that, or anything that I haven't asked or that we haven't talked about so far?
Um, no, I am in my first Saturn return, but for the most part, that has just been me finding a new job that I am actually a lot happier in.
Got it. Right. So you're finishing that up. So that started in 2023 when Saturn went into Pisces in your 10th whole sign house. And it's actually been in the most intense phase of that over the past year or so, that since your Saturn is so late in the sign at 25, and then you've got one more pass of that coming really soon when Saturn goes back into Pisces in September, and then we're going to get eclipses in your 10th and fourth house. So when did you start that job, or what was that process for you? Did you lose a job or have to leave a job and then you found a better one?
I actually elected to go job searching in 2023 as Mars was in my sixth house. And I found this job and started December of 2023. We did move across the country for it. And everything was going smoothly. And
Hmm.
in March of this year, my colleague had a child, and I was taking over a lot of their responsibilities. And they come back, I think, at the end of this month when Saturn crosses back into Pisces.
Oh, wow. So then what happens when they come back?
When they come back, they're going to take over the rest of their tasks, assumably. And then I did notice that as my next Saturn return pass goes through, I think it's in December, is when my end of year review is scheduled for. It's like to the day. So I did notice
Okay.
that. I was like, that's interesting.
Right. Yeah, so you'll have your end of year review right as you're having your last pass of, oh wow, it's going to go exact. Okay, so it's so Saturn stations when does it station? There it is. Stations direct late November at 2509 Pisces, and your natal Saturn is at 2521 Pisces. Yeah, so you do have a day chart. So Saturn returns are typically more constructive. It's interesting that you actually have a mutual reception between Jupiter and Saturn in the eighth house and the 10th house. So somehow it's tying together 10th house and eighth house topics in the long term as part of your career. So that's like your career, your overall life direction, your reputation, but also sometimes the resources of the partner, other people's money, issues related to debt, sometimes mortality, taxes, or other things like that, somehow coming into play in the long term career wise.
I am an accountant, so I've always
Oh,
taken
okay.
that to be the signification there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my usual actually like go to like literal eighth house manifestation of the eighth house and other people's money is accounting. So that's pretty literal. Nice. I love that. All right. So you'll have your end of the year review and then either that'll come back well and then you'll maybe get further into that job or be promoted or something, or if there's like issues that arise, you'll have to sort of address it at that time, and then Saturn will depart from your 10th house and move into your 11th.
Mhm.
What is the final, like, what is the essence of your Saturn return been so far, if you had to summarize it in your 10th house in terms of career?
Uh, Being more independent, I would say actually. I feel like in over the course of my Saturn return have either had jobs where nobody else is doing what I'm doing, or I suddenly have coworkers leave and I have to do more than what I was hired for.
Okay, so like taking on greater responsibility, basically.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Perfect. All right. Well, I think those are pretty good manifestations of like all of those different transits in pretty interesting and like straightforward and literal ways. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, and I hope you have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
So maybe I'll do one or two others, but this has been good. This actually turned out really well, and we've had a lot of really interesting examples, and this is exactly what I was hoping for, just to have. Yeah, I love looking at charts and hearing people's unique stories and some of the unique ways that the placements can manifest in people's lives. It's really fun and like compelling. And I always learn something new every time I look at a chart, even though it's also fulfilling things of what I would expect or what I already know about astrology. Danielle, yours might be worth taking a look at, where you traveled the world as a kid, but the other one that doesn't involve your chart. Um, It can be either a current transit that has something that would be interesting to talk about, but mostly I'm looking for ones that are some unique thing that's happened in your life where I'm just looking for what the natal signature is in your birth chart that matches that.
Good morning.
Hey, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
What's your birth data?
6:20 a.m. on the 27th of October, 84.
6:20 a.m.
Correct.
And what location?
Perth, West Australia.
Is your ascendant 20 degrees of Scorpio?
Yep. We got a
All
nice
right.
little stellium there.
Little bit of a stellium. Um, looks a little familiar.
Yes, yeah, you mean Katy Perry.
Well, I was born a few days later, but also Katy Perry, yeah. Um, all right. So what was your example? You said you moved a lot as a child.
Yeah, so I was a expat, what they call as an expatriate child. So my parents moved from when I was 3 months old, and we moved globally. So pretty much every 3 or 4 years, we'd change countries, like the UK, Holland, Turkey, even Syria. And
Wow.
it wasn't
Okay.
until I moved to boarding school back in Australia when I was 12.
And then at 12 it ended. Okay. So let's see. So you have Scorpio rising. The ruler of the ascendant is Mars in the third house, um, which sometimes in and of itself can give a focus on traveling around since all of the declining houses or the cadent houses indicate travel. The ruler of the fourth is Saturn, which is in Scorpio in the
First,
first house. Okay. How did that impact your sense of identity, um, moving around that much early on?
I don't think I actually necessarily did because for me, that was normal. So it was normal not to have, childhood friends that were there all the time or a stable, like it was just like, okay, well, now we're going to move here. So yeah, it's a bit of a, thank you, a bit of a Scorpio queen. Yeah, it just became a part of my identity. And I think if anything, that Scorpio kind of like, I'm happy to just cut people out of my life kind of thing. Like it's just like, oh yeah, cool, all right, bye. Because the
Right.
internet wasn't around, so you're quite happy to just move on and restart again, sort of
Yeah,
that.
that's part of so Mars ruling the ascendant, it's in the third house in the day chart, and yeah, moving around a lot, but also, yeah, having to cut people out of your life, and so that became something that was more common for you early on. Did that influence like the way that you do things when you grow up, or the way that you relate to people growing up?
I guess. Well, I also then did that again on my Saturn return as well. Surprise, surprise, and moved again. And a lot of people, obviously, yeah, then sort of naturally just move out of your life because you're not close physically to them, and restart again then as well. So it's not an unfamiliar feeling, I suppose, to need to do that, where it's sort of like it doesn't burden me to go, okay, well now that person is no longer in my life. I don't
Right.
carry that I'm assuming that guilt or that stress or that empathy to go, yep, okay, well that chapter is over and now let's start a new chapter.
Right. So it's like not having attachments in that way and being able to move on at a sort of metaphorical moment's notice became part of just that's sort of ingrained in you in a sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What was the move during your Saturn return?
I moved from the east coast of Australia to the west coast of Australia, so back to my birth town.
Okay, that's interesting. So you actually returned to your birthplace or location
Yeah,
roughly on your Saturn return.
yeah. No, it was quite literally like my 30th birthday.
Oh wow. Okay. So 30th birthday. Um, Interesting. Okay, so that's your Saturn return, and that's activating your fourth house of home and living situation, but also your third house, which is like your neighborhood, but also, yeah, reactivating the idea of like moving and changing things again. Have
So
you been in
is
the
it the third
same?
house that's doing that travel that's pulling that? Because that's something haven't been able to work out.
Yeah, because it's like people
Just
often
long distance.
associate everybody associates the ninth house with travel, which is true, but all of the cadent houses are associated with travel because they're all moving away from the fixity of the present, which is what the four angular houses signify, and especially the fourth house, which is the very bottom of the chart,
Mm.
and it's like the earth that's directly below our feet. But the planets that are in the third house, they're moving away from that. They're being sort of dragged away from, or they're in the process themselves of moving away from the fixity of the fourth house and moving, because if the fourth house especially also represents your home and living situation, then the third house represents somehow moving away from that. And while that can mean more localized movement of like cars or your neighborhood or other things like that, the fact that it has this movement component itself can bring in ideas of like not staying fixed or travel or going away from home.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and that was funny because with like Katy Perry recently, whose chart is very similar to yours, that was one of the things that came up when she was having some third house activations recently, was like going on a space flight in that rocket ship in like March or whatever it was, April. Um, but then also receiving some like criticism for it at the same time, which is an interesting manifestation of that. Trying to think of what else. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have one sibling. Yep, one
Okay.
brother.
Um,
So
so you have the most positive planet in your chart, which is Jupiter, as well as the most challenging planet in your chart. What's been the like nature of your relationship?
we fought a lot as children. So it wasn't until we were much older that we sort of got over that sort of sibling yeah hatred of one another.
Nice.
And more so myself directed towards him. But even though we're actually in the same town, we rarely see each other.
Mhm. Okay. Is that something that got better post, like during and after your Saturn return?
Yes, definitely. Yep, a little bit
Nice.
before.
Okay.
Yep, rectified that.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess that's the other thing that's happening here is like our other examples. This is another example of a mutual reception because you have Mars in Capricorn and Saturn in Scorpio. So they're exchanging signs, which is
Mm.
further reinforcing some of the closeness and the close connection between the first house and the third house. And travel is part of that for you, but also so with the conflict with your brother growing up, did you say something about that partially arising from you?
Yes, yeah. I just, as most children do, developed an opinion that he was the favorite child. So therefore, I had the opinion that he was, I therefore did not like him very much, having to share. And I had a filtered lens of life that he was the favorite child and got all the best of the best things. So, um, yeah, had
Yeah,
to
that
sort of
makes sense.
console that with myself to go, actually, that wasn't, or isn't the case. I
Yeah.
should jump on in next year's time as well, because when I've got some really nice transits happening through sixth house early next year, when I'm planning on having double jaw surgery as well. So thus the braces at the moment to prepare for that.
Okay. Yeah, with Saturn recently went into your sixth house. What's the jaw surgery about?
I'm getting double jaw surgery to correct a recessed jaw, and
Hmm.
a lot of inconclusion in oculation or something. I can't remember the word. And to fix breathing and being tongue tied
Okay.
issues.
Nice. That's good. Oh, being tongue-tied, so it's affected your ability to communicate.
Less so communication, more breathing
Breathing. Okay.
and just
Got it.
tightness of jaw and neck, which I know is related, and jaw and teeth are related to Saturn. And I know Saturn's going to be in Aries by next year, early next year as well.
Yeah. And did you set that schedule recently or established that, or is that what
I,
you
I
meant?
started I started this has been sort of almost a 2-year journey already trying to get to this stage. And when I did look at, whether or not I even want to go down this journey to correct everything, it became a question of, okay, well, what is this looking like? And I'll actually be a sixth house year next year as well. So, because I'm in a fifth house
Mm,
year at the moment. So it was like, hang on, I'm in a sixth house year. There'll be transits in there as well at the same time. So it's sort of like, I think you use the term sort of, you're like paying paying the piper kind of thing. Something's going to happen.
yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And then just in terms of the recovery from that and just sort of being a long-term process. And then I'm sure once it's reset, like the process of learning how to do some of those things again, or at least getting used to that it feels much different than what you've been used to up to this point.
Correct. Yeah, massively so.
Nice. All right. Well, that's good though. That'll be great once you do that, and that'll be a nice like long-term Saturn thing in terms of like fixing something, and then eventually Saturn will get out of your sixth house and you'll have emerged from it, done something that was kind of hard and that took a while, but that ultimately was for the best and that you appreciate once it's done.
Correct. That's definitely what I'm hoping for.
Nice. Are there any other ways that the third house has shown up in your life that we haven't talked about so far? Like one of the only other ones is communication, that I was
So
curious
that
about.
I guess that's career. So I work in marketing, and more recently sales operations. So a lot of communicating with teams and people through that is
Got
I
it.
think how that shows up.
Got it. Okay. So communicating and being direct in your like manner of communication is something that's an asset to you and that you've been able to use to your benefit.
Asset, and sometimes it comes to bite me. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Being
That's funny.
being
Okay.
too being too direct and being too sort of, yeah, cutting with words.
Yeah, that's one of the issues with when the more difficult malefic is the ruler of the ascendant that I have always observed that sometimes the issues
Sorry,
arise
getting a
from
small child. Hello.
no problem. Um, Sometimes with the more difficult malefic is the ruler of the ascendant, that sometimes the issues arise from within the person themselves, and sometimes they create some of the issues that come up in the life. So it's interesting you mentioning that, just that perhaps somehow like communication style or things like that could be something that gets you into trouble sometimes, or also the thing in terms of acknowledging that sometimes some of the strife between you and your brother arose from you, but that as you've gotten older, you've been able to work on some of those things more and identify that within yourself.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I think that's a great example, and that really helps round out like a recurring theme that we keep coming back to pretty much all day, which is like the third house and communication and siblings, but also for you bringing in this travel component at the same time.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, thanks for sharing your chart.
Thanks.
All right, awesome. Let me take a look at the chat. So, the last one I think was Betsy. If you're around. Hey,
Hi, can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay.
What's your birth data?
Uh, September 11, 1963,
What time?
1:06 p.m. Eastern,
And what place?
Winchester, Massachusetts.
All right. Is your ascendant 6 degrees of Sagittarius?
6:16.
616. Okay, here's your chart. What was the having trouble finding it? What was the short synopsis of the story that I had picked?
So, the one about my brother. So my mother died November 19, 2022, and at the time that she died, my brother had been living in a cottage in her backyard for since January of 1998. She promised she would never kick him out. So he never got a job, never helped her with anything.
Mhm.
And she, ended up so worried about money, she started getting involved with scammers, gave away a lot of money. When she died, I did not know that for sure that she had a will or where it was. I found an older will, and I found drafts of a later will. Um, the earlier will that I found, she divided her property equally amongst the four children. But then in 1999, my father died, and he disinherited me and that brother and gave his money to my sister and other brother. And so after that, my mother started drafting out another will, another set of documents, and I found those drafts. Um, and then after she died, basically my brother assumed that he had inherited at least half of the property. He said he was fine, that I would be executor, but he expected that that meant that I would continue to pay his way and let him live on the property. And then when I found the will and got a probate lawyer, my sister alerted my brother to he never checked his mail. So my sister alerted to him when the lawyer sent out the notice that I had been named to be executor. And at that point, my brother asked the probate lawyer for a copy of the will and was distressed that he hadn't actually inherited half the property. Um, and so he just kind of doubled down and decided that he would try to just stay on the property and claim that my mother had meant that his inheritance was living on the property for the rest of his life.
Mhm. Okay,
Um,
so you have Sagittarius rising and Saturn is in your third house in Aquarius retrograde in a day chart. Um, I see that the moon is in Cancer in its own sign in the eighth house, but it's square a retrograde Mercury that it's just stationed 4 days before you were born. And you said that your mom passed away in November, in late, like the fall of 2019.
yeah, November 19, 2022. Sorry.
Oh, 2022. Okay. So you're in the middle of your second Saturn return during this time when Saturn is going through Aquarius, and then what arises is Saturn ruling your third house of siblings and also your second house of finances, and the ambiguity and issues with your brother over the will, and or not ambiguity, but just his issues over the will. But I see that Saturn at 17 Aquarius is squaring Neptune at 13 Scorpio in the 12th house, which also creates some issues there. So this is part of your Saturn return story, basically, though, for your second Saturn return.
Yeah, and I think like Saturn went retrograde during that period of time, so it was kind of like a excitingly long Saturn return.
Right. Yeah, yeah. What was the date when your mom passed away?
November 19, 2022.
Okay, so let me share the bi-wheel. So November 19th, 2022, Saturn was at 19 degrees of Aquarius, conjoining your natal Saturn at 17 degrees of Aquarius. And yeah, oh right, that was during the Saturn-Uranus square. So Uranus was at 16 degrees of Taurus, squaring your Saturn, and oh yeah, Mars is like retrograde 2022. it didn't start in Cancer, did it? Let me back it up. No, it started in Gemini. Okay. Um, what was the date again? You said November 19th?
November 19, 2022. I have the time and place too, if you wanted that.
That's okay. We're just looking at general transits.
Right.
There's actually a lot going. There's a ton of stuff going on here as well, but because it's like the Mars retrograde is squaring your IC at 24, and Neptune is conjoining that. The South Node is conjoining your Neptune in the 12th house, but to reframe to focus on the main thing, like this was your exact second Saturn return. What was your first Saturn return like? Was there stuff that came up with your brother the first time you had your Saturn return?
Um, the first Saturn return, I decided to go to grad school,
Hmm.
and um, at the time, I was hanging out a lot with this brother. I'd kind of been raised to think of him as a hero, and so that was kind of going on at that time. But then
So your first Saturn return,
actually,
you actually have a relatively good relationship with him between like 1991 and 1993 slash 4.
yeah. But then I moved in 90 in 93. So in 93, actually, I finished my first master's degree, and then I started another master's degree in Connecticut. And in summer of 94, I moved down to Connecticut. And around about that time, I started um, just sort of realizing that he was not a very mature person. Um,
Interesting. It sounds like a lot of this is the Saturn Neptune square that's really close with Neptune at 13 Scorpio and Saturn at 17 Aquarius. So you said, how did you describe it? You were raised to view him as being like a superhero type figure?
yeah, I mean, basically, yeah, he was like a hero to me, him and my sister both. And it's
And
really only
is that coming from you, or is that coming from your mother or your parents and the way that they treated them?
it was definitely not in the way my father treated them, but I since my mother's death, I've really just kind of like looking through her papers, and she saved everything. I've realized that a lot of my impressions about them had to do with her desire to have a happy family.
Hmm.
And just like some things have been kind of coming back, like an incident when I was around like 4 or 5 that they instigated that was just really incredibly cruel to do to a 4-year-old. They're like 7 and 8 years older than me. And
There was something that your siblings did to you when you were 4 that was cruel?
yeah, so I try to be really brief. It was around my birthday, and they gave me this big box. It was all wrapped up beautifully. And I opened it up, and there was a smaller box inside, all wrapped up beautifully. And I kept opening the boxes, and I was really excited because it was really exciting to open these beautiful boxes. And I got to the smallest one, and it was a thumbtack.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so, of course, I started crying, and my mother came running, and she then ran and got the present that she had bought for them to give to me, and that made it all better.
Okay. Was that a singular incident, or were there other issues where you had tensions or other
They were
issues with
kind,
your siblings growing up?
yeah, there were kind of other things. Like a little later in my childhood, I was really chubby, and my brother started calling me skinny because he thought that was really funny that I was chubby. I mean, at
Hmm.
the time, I thought that he like recognized in me something that, nobody else did. And then like years later, I discovered that it was actually just making fun of me. Um,
Huh. Okay, interesting. So there's a few things going on there. Um, So back to the more recent thing, what was the resolution to working out your mother's will during your second Saturn return?
So, so the probate lawyer highly suggested that I have my brother served with a 120-day notice to quit, which is not exactly an eviction, but in Massachusetts, it's kind of like preliminary to an eviction. And so that notice to quit end date was July 31st. I got the senior center director in town
Of 2023?
of 2023, right?
Okay.
And a friend of my brother's, they were trying to get him to enroll in Social Security. Just after my mother died, I showed him how to log into Social Security. I proved to him that he had Social Security money coming, but he kept on kind of sabotaging the whole process of applying for Social Security and applying for Medicaid, which
Mm.
delayed him being able to be put into emergency 30% housing, which would be like to have Social Security and just to have to pay 30% of his costs. And so basically throughout the spring, he was telling people that he was assessing his options, and it appeared that actually came out and said he was trying to prove that somehow I had promised my mother that I would take care of him for the rest of his life, on the condition that she give me the entire property, which was just ridiculous. Ultimately, I got a real estate lawyer involved, and that real estate lawyer strongly suggested that I take him to court to put a permanent injunction against him um, stepping anywhere on the property except for the place where he was living. He was lighting fires on the property. He was sabotaging my efforts to repair my mother's house. He was coming into the house every night and staying up all night and kind of doing weird things. And
So you moved into your mother's house after you inherited it?
I did not. I actually, he made me so scared I wouldn't go to the house without friends there.
Okay.
But she was a hoarder and he is a hoarder. He was a hoarder. And so I was like coming down to the house a couple of times a week to work remotely.
Hmm.
And I had some friends who were helping me go through her things. Um,
I'm
uh,
just seeing, it's just interesting how Saturn was transiting through your fourth house, and it's like you're dealing with attempting to renovate your mother's house basically during this entire period of Saturn going into Pisces in early 2023. Um, Going back to him, you mentioned she was a hoarder and that he was a hoarder. Is there like an underlying issue of like mental illness when it comes to him, or what's the deal with that?
I'm thinking that there has to be. He's got Sun in Cancer, Moon in Virgo, Virgo rising. He got a PhD in physics, but he never did anything with it.
Hmm.
He raised bees on the property. My mother bought him beekeeping equipment, hoping to kind of inspire him um, to do that for work. Um, but he didn't. It seemed ultimately what happened was I did get a permanent injunction against him, and luckily a friend of his managed to convince him to vacate the property on the end of July 31st. I told him if he left the end of July 31st, I would sign over my mother's car to him for $1, which I did on August 1st. It sounds really ungenerous of me, but I realized that if I had offered to give it to him and pay insurance, that he would have felt like I had something up my sleeve.
Hmm. Okay. So
So there's definitely a lot of paranoia in him.
okay. So Yeah, July 31st is interesting just because that's right when the Venus retrograde and the ninth started that year, although that then would have retrograded back and stationed opposite your Saturn eventually. And yeah, so end result, what's the short version of like where do you stand with your brother at this point?
I don't have anything to do with him, but he did manage to get onto Social Security and Medicaid. And the very end of that year, beginning of the following year, he got a one-bedroom apartment in senior housing in the same town. I was going to sell my mother's house. I ultimately decided to keep it, and I lived there. And so he's in the same town on the other side of town in senior housing, 30% housing. So he just pays 30% of his Social Security, and that includes his rent, and he gets other benefits as well. So he's
Hmm,
actually set for the rest of his life, although I assume that he resents me, but I'm not interested in finding out
got it.
anything
All right.
further.
Yeah, so then you ended up moving into your mother's house, so that would have been part of Saturn going through your fourth house subsequently as it was going through Pisces, since you have Sagittarius rising, and then oh right, okay, so Pluto went into Aquarius, so part of this is like um yeah, Pluto going into Aquarius into your third house as well over the past few years as it started making those ingresses from 2023 forward or whatever it was.
Mhm.
So, okay. Well, that is, yeah, like another, yeah, it's like third house example, but it's interesting how, um, that came up as such a major part of your Saturn return, your second Saturn return. And even though that was difficult, and your relationship with him ended basically as a result of that, how it brought together some of those threads from earlier in your life, I guess, that had been sort of building up for quite a while at that point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about the earlier examples in the first Saturn return, but that really kind of fits. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, usually, I mean, to whatever extent it was from that Saturn placement and especially that Saturn Neptune square, usually there's other things like earlier in the life in terms of different Saturn transits or other third house transits activating that placement that would have foreshadowed some of the stuff that happened later. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's any revisiting of that at any point during subsequent transits or if that's sort of the end of that. Um, so that you said you had one other sibling. You have a sister as well, though?
I actually have two brothers and a sister,
Okay.
and I don't talk to any of them. Um,
Okay.
the other brother alienated himself really back in, I think it was around 2007, 2008. Um, he told my mother just, you know, to get lost out of his life. And when she died, he expressed surprise that she was even alive. Um, and my sister is very bonded with my brother, my oldest brother, and so she apparently resents me for um, kicking him out of his situation.
Mhm. Okay.
So
Got it.
yeah.
So the Saturn, that's one of the things that can sometimes happen with challenging placements, especially Saturn in different houses, is it can negate things or say no to things. But in that instance, it's sort of negated some of those relationships in terms of siblings. And yeah, that makes sense. So that's a really good example, and it kind of fills in somehow we ended up with a sibling theme today, but I think we've seen the full gambit of all of the different like possible manifestations on the spectrum of how those relationships can go and turn out in different ways. Yeah, so thanks for sharing that. I think that was a really good example.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. And yeah, take care. All right. Awesome. So that was great. Yeah, so I don't, I didn't plan for this to be like the third house webinar, but somehow it sort of turned into that. But it's been really interesting because one of the things I always reflected on as a counseling astrologer is how sometimes people can tend to take for granted their experience of a certain area of their life and assume that it's that way for everybody. But one of the things you learn pretty quickly as a consulting astrologer is there is just a wide range of different possible manifestations, and there's a full like spectrum of different ways that people can experience each area, each of the major areas of a person's life. And yeah, it can run the full gambit. So that's one of the things I love to do though when I sit down and talk with people about their chart is just um, with my Scorpio stellium, I love this like investigative process of trying to understand very quickly because you got to do it pretty quickly. You got to take the chart, look at it, like have your assessment, and then dialogue with the person in order to start to understand and fill in the picture of what has actually happened in their life and how those placements have worked out. And part of that is you also have to navigate the person's like experience, subjective experience and self-perception of different things, and to reconcile that with what you see in the chart and like what your expectations are about the chart. And on the one hand, try to sometimes like ferret out the ways in which what the chart is saying actually matches with the person's life, even if in some instances the subjective experience of the person is sort of like different or their perception might be different. But then also sometimes be open to revising your understanding of the chart if you had an expectation that's not matching up with the person's reality. So it's a delicate balance between those two things. Um, yeah, April says in the chat, I think it's really interesting that some of the placements don't manifest until later years. So that's one of the things is like, and that's one of the tricky things working with younger clients. If you have a consultation with somebody in their 20s, there's a lot of stuff in the birth chart that just may not have happened yet that's indicated there, but it may not even be something that there's been a great preview of yet because there's a lot of pieces in the birth chart that may not work out until later in the person's life. So that was always one of my challenges where it's much easier typically to talk to somebody that's older in a consultation setting because they've already had a lot of the main themes in the birth chart play out. And so a lot of it is just talking to them in a way that sort of like confirm you're saying things that just kind of confirm things that they already know. Whereas sometimes one of the challenges with a younger person is you might say things that they really don't connect with because that part of their chart hasn't fully manifested yet. So it's just a occupational thing of what you got to work with. So thanks everybody for joining me today, and especially thanks to everybody who shared their chart and shared their stories. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for joining me for this impromptu live chart and transit reading session that I do sometimes for patrons. Um, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it's good to do my favorite thing, which is just to talk astrology with different people and talk about their birth chart and understand their life and come to some understanding of how the abstract placements like manifested in concrete scenarios in different parts of the life. And I will never for my entire life that will never continue to like fascinate me that works and like how impressively it works and how literal some of the placements can manifest at different points in a person's life. So I love doing this stuff and I love having the opportunity to talk to people and see so many different ways that things can manifest, as well as just talking to people from so many different walks of life that never gets old. So I love it. All right. Well, I think that's it for this webinar. So, and for this episode of the Astrology Podcast. So thanks everyone for watching or listening to this episode. And we'll see you again next time. If you're a fan of the podcast and you'd like to find a way to help support my research, then consider becoming a patron through my page on patreon.com. In exchange, you'll get access to subscriber benefits such as early access to new episodes, the ability to attend live recordings, the monthly electional astrology podcast, an exclusive podcast series called the Secret Astrology Podcast that's only available to patrons, or you can even get your name listed in the credits. For more information, go to patreon.com/astrologypodcast. Special thanks to patrons on my producers tier, including patrons Christy Moe, Ariana Amour, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Issa Sabah, Jeannie Marie Kaplan, Melissa Delano, Sunny Bazbaz, Kwatsi Alabarahu, Annie Newman, Ginger Sodlier, Berlin West, and Nikki Crawford. People often ask me if I'm available for consultations, but unfortunately I'm not right now because the podcast takes up so much of my time. However, I did create a consultations page on the Astrology Podcast website that has a list of astrologers that I recommend for astrological consultations. You can find that at theastrologypodcast.com/consultations. The astrology software we use here on the podcast is called SolarFire for Windows, which is astrology software for the PC. You can get a 15% discount by using the promo code AP15 at the website alabe.com. For Mac users, I recommend the software AstroGold for Mac OS, which is astrology software for the Mac computer made by the creators of SolarFire for the PC. You can get a 15% discount with the promo code AstroPodcast15 through their website at astrogold.io. If you're really looking to deepen your studies of astrology, then I would recommend signing up for my Hellenistic Astrology course, which is an online course in ancient astrology where I take people from basic concepts up through intermediate and advanced techniques for reading birth charts. There's over 100 hours of video lectures, plus monthly webinars and Q&A sessions, and then at the end of the course you get a certificate of completion saying that you studied with me if you pass the final written test. Find out more information at theastrologyschool.com. Finally, shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which is the United Astrology Conference, which is happening September 3rd through the 9th, 2026 in Chicago. Find out more information at uacastrology.com.